So if you caught my last video, you know we did a review of the Eastern Conference standings for this upcoming season and predicting where each team will fall in the standings 1 through 15. Well, in this video, we're going to be going through the Western Conference, just a stacked conference this is. In my view, it's much harder to predict where teams are going to fall. In fact, going through these and trying to plot out each team, I had to go through a good 5 different versions, and to be honest, I'll probably keep changing my mind on how the conference is actually going to shake out. Like the East, some pretty big shifts that happened in the West. You obviously had Damian Lillard move to the East, Bradley Beal was traded to the Suns, DeAndre Ayton was finally traded away from the Suns and is now a member of the Portland Trail Blazers. A generational talent in Victor Wembanyama joined the Western Conference. Chris Paul is now on the Warriors. The Thunder now have Chet Holmgren back and healthy. You get it. Like any NBA offseason, there are a lot of changes and you have to account for those changes when making predictions on how teams will fare in the upcoming season. So let's go through these in order 1 through 15, and while I'm going through it, let me know in the comments below what you guys think. As always, if you're new to the channel and you like this type of content, it would mean a great deal to me if you subscribed, and in return I'll be providing more NBA content like this. Starting at number 1. Who's going to take the number 1 seed in the West? I know to some it's going to be boring, and I feel like a lot of people think they actually won't finish first after winning the title last season, but I've got the Denver Nuggets. To me, the Nuggets are still the best team in the West, top to bottom, with the most depth, the best roster construction, the best coach, and of course, it also helps to have the best player in the world. I used to have Giannis as my top player in the NBA, but I really feel like Jokic has surpassed him in that regard. That could change going into this upcoming season, but for now, it's Jokic. And unlike some of these other teams in the West, like the Suns, the Clippers, Lakers, or even the Warriors, who a lot of people consider them to be top teams in the West with superstar talent, in my view, I don't think the Nuggets are going to be resting their players, or I guess I should say quote-unquote resting, because we know the league has a new policy in place about resting players. But the Nuggets, generally speaking, they play their guys, and they play consistently well together. Being the best team at home in the NBA last year, the guys come out to play, they do their job, and they execute. And it's why, even despite the fact that after coming off a title run, they may not care as much about the regular season success, I still have them finishing first in the West. At number 2, this one will probably come as a surprise, but I've got the LA Clippers. Here's the thing. The Clippers know this is likely their last chance to win a title with the current group that they have. They know the clock is ticking on Kawhi and Paul George, one, because they're still playing at a high level, so you need to take advantage of that, but also the fact that both players have player options on their contracts the following season. If things don't go well this year, it's likely they could decline those options and look to go elsewhere as free agents next summer. Not only that, but because of the new player participation policy, also the new minimum 65-game policy for players to be eligible for major NBA awards, including All-NBA, which impacts a player's supermax eligibility, you're not going to see guys like Kawhi Leonard and Paul George getting away with just resting on back-to-backs like they're used to doing. Yeah, they'll still have their excuses here and there, they're going to sit out some games, they'll make up some injury like a calf strain, but the players are also going to want to be eligible for All-NBA award consideration, especially when they're potentially playing in a contract year, which both Kawhi and Paul George would if they plan to decline their player options on the final year of their deal. All of this long-winded explanation to say, the Clippers, in my view, will see more consistency in terms of who's playing on a nightly basis, and they're going to win more games as a result of it. And with the talent they have, the fact that they may even add James Harden, it's why I have them finishing second in the West. The other thing for the Clippers, I think they're going to take seeding more seriously this year. Home court advantage being paramount for them. You know, after last season, they had to face off against the Suns in the first round without home court advantage, even though side by side when healthy, they were pretty evenly matched against them. They're going to want to have an easier opponent in the first round, have home court advantage, and the only way to do that is to try and finish as close to the top of the West as possible. Next up, at number 3, this is where I have the Phoenix Suns. Look, we know the Suns have some of the best talent in the NBA. Kevin Durant is one of the greatest players in the league. He's one of the greatest scorers of this generation. You add him on top of Devin Booker, who is also an incredible gifted scorer. You have Bradley Beal, another incredible scorer. There is no shortage of offense on this team. Now, the fit, when you add that many stars who like to get their shots, that's another topic up for debate. Defense also going to be a challenge. This is more or less going to just be a try and outscore your opponent any given night on most nights, which they'll be able to do because they have such stacked, incredible offensive players. The reason I have them at number 3 though is because I do think it's unlikely that we see Kevin Durant play all or most of the season. We know Beal has had his history with injuries, and also for this team, they know their window to win a championship is somewhat narrow with Kevin Durant now being 35 years old. They're not going to go full steam ahead for the whole regular season. They're just not. They're not going to win 60 plus games even though they have the talent to do so. And because of that, I have them slipping on this list just a bit to finishing 3rd in the West. 4th, this is where I have the Kings. The Sacramento Kings, who finished 3rd in the West last season. They had this incredible run, a turnaround year, went to the playoffs for the first time in like 15 years. And while I know a lot of the media and analysts are saying, this was probably a fluke run last year for the Kings, I really don't see how one can arrive at that conclusion when you consider, for the most part, this team has remained intact. They're young and will continue to get better with time and experience. De'Aaron Fox is broken out into the star. Domantas Sabonis, one of the best bigs in the league. They've got perfect components of shooting, floor spacing. They play fast. They're efficient. I mean, they were the #1 team on offense last season for a reason. The only reason they weren't better was because their defense was subpar. So while I do have this team dropping 1 spot just because the West got that much better, I still think they're going to be a force in the Western Conference and finish top 4. 5th, this is where I have the LA Lakers. This is where things start getting a little harder to predict because really, kind of like the East to be honest, 4 through 12 are up for grabs. But for the Lakers, I personally think they had one of the best off seasons in the NBA. They signed their key players they wanted to keep when a lot of people thought they were going to have to lose at least one of Reeves, Hachimura, or D'Angelo Russell. Instead, they were able to re-sign all of them on fairly team-friendly deals. They added some shooting, they added some size with Christian Wood. I still don't see them getting out of the West. I think the West is just too talented, and I think it'll be questionable whether they'll actually be able to have the kind of playoff run they did last season when there's always the uncertainty of Anthony Davis's health. And at some point, you have to think LeBron is going to slow down even just a little bit after he turns 39 years old this year. But regardless, when it comes to the regular season success, I do think they're good enough to be in the top 5, but I don't see them exceeding some of these teams that I have before them, even though I know the Lakers have some of the best championship odds and you have media outlets putting them higher than number 5. At number 6, this is my hot take. I'm aware this is a very bold prediction, but at 6, I have the Oklahoma City Thunder. If you caught my prior video from earlier in the offseason on why I think the Thunder will be the biggest surprise team this season, then you already know why I feel this way. This is an incredibly young, talented team that only got better as the season progressed last year. They played hard every night, they hustled every night. A lot of their losses last season were very close losses. And they only got better by adding their former number 2 pick, another generational talent, in Chet Holmgren. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander has ascended into a superstar. Josh Giddey continues to improve with his high-level IQ and improved offense. They got one of the better draft steals relative to where he was drafted in Jalen Williams. And here's the other thing. I would not be shocked if the Thunder, with the mountain of draft picks they have, that they pull the trigger on moving some of those picks to bring in another star to pair alongside Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. Like, if things go well and it starts to look like they really have a shot at something here, and there's some disgruntled star out there in the league, or a team that is going to end up going on a fire sale by the trade deadline, I could see Sam Presti finally moving some of those picks that he's been stashing for a rainy day and get another all-star to accelerate this team's timeline. So while I know it's a bit of a stretch to put a team like the Thunder at 6, a team that finished 10th last year, but I am very, very high on this team, not only just for their future, but also for this upcoming season as well. At number 7, this is where I have the Dallas Mavericks. Another big jump for a team last year that severely underperformed and ended up missing the play-in, but with a full offseason training camp of Kyrie Irving and Luka playing together, the addition of Grant Williams, they traded for Richaun Holmes, they drafted Derek Lively, or I should say they traded for him on draft night, a player that I am super high on, by the way. They added shooting with Seth Curry, some versatility with Derek Jones Jr. I'm not saying they're suddenly going to be back at the top of the West and get back to the conference finals. I do have them 7th after all, but they will be better than last year. Missing the playoffs again would be inexcusable for this team. 8th, this is where I have the Memphis Grizzlies. Look, I know they finished 2nd in the West last season, but Ja Morant being out for almost a third of the season to start, as much as I don't like him, losing Dillon Brooks will hurt them. And while the addition of Smart is nice, I don't think that makes up for this team's deficiencies and what they're going to lose by not having Ja for an extended period of time. I just don't see them really making strong headways in a competitive West, and while I think they'll obviously make up some ground whenever Ja gets back, it's going to be too much to say putting them into the top 5. 9th, and again, as I'm going through these, this is where it gets so complicated because I'm putting the Minnesota Timberwolves here, and I haven't even mentioned the Golden State Warriors, a team that just won the championship 2 years ago. But I'll get to them. Like I said, right here, I have the Timberwolves. They finished 8th last season. Probably would have had a better record if Karl-Anthony Towns didn't miss a good portion of the year. And you'd have to think that Anthony Edwards is only going to get better and build upon what he was doing last season. So while I think the Timberwolves actually have the ability to be better, especially if they can stay healthy, I just don't like the way this team is built. Obviously, the Rudy Gobert trade was a mistake, especially when you consider everything they had to give up to get him. I think Karl-Anthony Towns, as good as he is actually pretty overrated because he always ends up getting outworked by guys who are smaller than him, and also the fact that his defense is atrocious. And I think it was a nice idea to put Gobert next to him to allow him to focus on spacing the floor and not having to worry about protecting the rim as much. It just hasn't really worked out between these two, as well as they thought anyway. And it's why I don't see them making much progress from where they were last season. And then 10th, this is where I have the Warriors. You know, being from the Bay Area, I know I'm going to get a lot of hate on this, but really the reason I have the Warriors so low is not because I don't think they have the talent to win and do well. It's because I'm anticipating a lot of injuries from this team. We already have Draymond Green out, and he'll miss a little bit to start the season. Klay Thompson is not the same player he used to be. Steph is still playing out of his mind, but I wouldn't be surprised if he has an injury of some kind that puts him out for a period of time this year. And then they brought in retirement-bound Chris Paul, who can never stay healthy for a full season, especially in the playoffs. And even as good as the Warriors still are, they still have a great offensive system. And while I'm sure Steve Kerr is going to run the same style of offense they've been doing since 2015, it's a little different now in terms of guys being able to play as fast and as efficient when they're in their early to mid 20s compared to now in their early to mid 30s. They're not going to be able to keep up with the same level of pace and space. And I also still kind of go back to the fact that the Warriors still don't take the center position seriously in actually getting a quality big that can compete with the likes of Jokic. But I don't see this group staying healthy. If Steph has to miss considerable time, then yes, I see them falling drastically, which is why I have them at the final play-in spot. Okay, this video is really dragging on. Let me go through the bottom 5 fairly quickly. 11, I've got the Pelicans. I mean, this is all dependent on Zion's health. If he's healthy, they'll easily be able to be a top 10 team in the West, but I'm just going based off history. History tells us that's unlikely, and if that's the case, I can't see them beating out these top 10 teams for a better record in the standings. 12th, I've got the Jazz. I still like what they're doing as a team. They came up in those trades for Gobert and Donovan Mitchell in terms of the draft capital they were able to acquire, but still not good enough to make their way into the play-in territory. 13th, I've got the Spurs, and to be honest with the way Wembanyama has been playing thus far in the preseason, I might even have to put him higher. The kid is just something else, a phenomenal talent that can impact the game in so many different ways, and he alone may be able to take this team to higher places than just 13th in the West. 14th, this is where I have the Rockets. I still don't think this team is going to be very good despite adding Van Fleet, Dillon Brooks. They just drafted Thompson, who I think is going to be great. Jalen Green will hopefully improve further. But yeah, I'm still not buying this team, mainly because of their maturity, their overall chemistry is questionable, and I don't see them really going far next season. And then finally, I got the Blazers. What's weird is I actually like this new look Blazers roster, and I kind of want to put them higher than last in the Western Conference because between Scoot, Simons, Shaedon Sharpe, and then also getting DeAndre Ayton as well as Robert Williams, like this team actually has decent talent. I just don't know that Chauncey Billups is the right coach for this team. And more importantly, still a young and experienced team that doesn't have a lot of time playing together. And it's why ultimately I don't see them winning very many games. Anyway, those are my predictions 1 through 15 for the West. Check out my predictions for the Eastern Conference in case you missed it. Let me know if you agree or disagree. As always, be sure to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.